before we go into the discussions proper, my name is Onome Menai, and I'm your host for today's event. We have with us an esteemed panel member who have industry experience, and they are going to be doing justice to this topic. Before we meet them, allow me to give a brief introduction into the reason why we're here. Now we're talking about data privacy and monetization. And data has been described as individual units of information. Chiamaka, if you can share the slides, that would be great. Data has been described as individual units of information, which can be measured, collected, reported, stored, analyzed, and it is now regarded as the oil of the digital era. It is also considered the world's most valuable asset. Basically, all the activities, the next slide please, Chiamaka. Basically, every human activity generates a digital trace with the use of the internet, your smartphones, and Internet of Things devices. These all contribute significantly to making data more abundant, available, and valuable. Now, every financial transaction, even when we are using our favorite apps or visiting our favorite websites, as long as we're conducting those activities over the internet, we are generating data. So the more activities we conduct over the internet, the more data that we generate. So due to the huge amount of data, personal data that is out there, it became imperative to kind of like come up with a way to regulate the use of personal data so as to prevent violation of the user's right to privacy. That is where data privacy comes in. What is data privacy? Data privacy relates to the handling of personal data in compliance with data protection laws, regulations, and general privacy best practices. It also speaks to who has or who should have access to data and the conditions for usage of that data. Now, of course, in Nigeria, there are ancillary provisions that try to protect the rights of the individuals for the way their data is being used. But the most comprehensive piece of legislation that we have is the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation, which was enacted pursuant to the NITA Act in 2019. Now, what this regulation seeks to do is to kind of like protect the right to privacy of Nigerian citizens. Now, it also speaks to how public and private institutions should handle personal data of individuals. Now, the NDPR is a reflection of the GDPR, if I might add. The NDPR is to Nigerian citizens what the GDPR is to the EU citizens. And so we get to the point where we have all this data and we have regulations about how to use this data. But then what do we do with this data that we say is a valuable asset? We have to be able to use it in a safe way to be able to generate revenue or for its economic value. That is where data monetization comes in. By and large, data monetization is just processing data for its economic value. In other words, using data to make money. And this can be done directly or indirectly. Now, you monetize data directly when you actually sell that data for its economic benefits or to gain economic benefits. But to monetize data indirectly would be a situation where you use the insights you gain from the data that you have to offer services or maybe improve your customer's experience, whatever it is, as long as the output or the result of that, the insights you've gained, generates revenue for you at the end of the day, you have indirectly monetized data. So let's go to the next slide, please. And so basically, the discussions we're going to be having here today will be centered around our thoughts on what data privacy and data monetization is. But however, there's one critical aspect of data monetization, and that is the 3 ethical and regulatory vectors in the monetization claims. That is, who has legitimate claim to this data. Now, the individual who offers his personal information, to be able to use a service, that person has a legitimate claim to data. Also, the organization who, in the course of carrying out their business, generate data, they also have legitimate claims to that data. And then we have the internet platforms, such as Google and Facebook, that require users to forgo some ownership interest in their data in exchange to be able to use their platform. They also have a legitimate claim to that data. So our panel members are going to be sharing their thoughts on these issues and more. And so in a nutshell, there's so much data. Every activity, like we said earlier, every activity that we do, we generate data, and we have to be able to use that data in a responsible manner. I can't wait for the panel members to dig into this topic. And I can assure all of us that from the discussions at the end of these discussions that we're going to be having here today, we will all leave here more knowledgeable than when we came. And so without taking any more time, let us meet our panel members who will be sharing their thoughts and their views on this topic today. Joining us on this panel today is Trevor Ryan, He's the Chief Experience Officer at CreditRegistry. Trevor, can you say hello to the...
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Yes, so just a very brief introduction, because I'm sure we've got a lot of questions to get through. But yeah, Trevor Ryan, 30-odd years of experience in working in credit bureaus throughout the world. I'm currently working with the CreditRegistry in Nigeria. So my background is basically in credit bureau operations, data privacy, and data in general, really. So hopefully I can add a little bit to this debate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Trevor. We are looking forward to your contributions. Also on the panel is Eniola Olatunde. She is a business development associate at Okra. Hi, Eniola. Please say hello.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So yes, my name is Eniola Olatunde. I work with the business development team at Okra, and what we do is basically to provide a data infrastructure, allow people to connect their accounts to other people's platforms. Basically to provide data to third party. So hopefully, we're able to do justice to the debate today. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. And then we have our in-house counsel. Her name is Modupe Aderibigbe. She will be contributing her own. She's making her own contributions from the way COURE handles personal data. Hello, Modupe.
Hi, Onome.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, so as Onome has already said, I'm the in-house counsel at COURE. I'm also recently been appointed as a data protection officer. So I believe that I also have a lot to contribute to today's discussion, and I'm looking forward to diving into the topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Modupe. And last but not the least is Winston Osuchukwu. He's the managing director at Migo Money. Hello, Winston.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, Winston Osuchukwu. I'm managing director at Migo Money. We are lending as a service platform, and we just work to deliver credit to individuals that are currently underserved.
Okay, so thank you. Like I said, our panel members are industry experts. They deal daily with data, and they're going to be providing insights and giving us so much benefits. We're going to get so much benefits from their wealth of experience. Now, just before we before we dive into the discussions proper, allow me to say that for those of us participating, listening to this webinar, you can feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. And also, at the end of the webinar, there is a feedback form. Just want to crave your indulgence to take out a few minutes of your time to fill out the feedback form, as we're always seeking ways to improve and bring content to you that you will find informative and you also enjoy. Okay, so thank you. I'd like to get your thoughts on the privacy regulations in Nigeria. What are your thoughts on the regulations?
Do you want us to, Anami, do you want us to sort of come back with some, then start the debate? So, I mean, I'm happy to start if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great, Trevor.
So I think just as a general principle, really, I think that Nigeria regulations, as you already said, are heavily based on data privacy and other regulations around the planet, particularly in Europe, of course. And I think it's fair to say that these regulations are pretty essential for obvious reasons. But I would also say that a lot of people can get a little bit fearful of the fact that data sharing and the use of data, it has, particularly in the world of social media, perhaps has quite a sort of poor view. But what I would sort of say and throw out there, and it's up for debate, is that the upside to data sharing, certainly in the financial world, is all good, because I think that you've got to look at all the evidence that suggests that proper, regulated, and effective data sharing and use of data generally helps consumers and businesses do better. It's good for countries' economies. We know that there's plenty of evidence to show that GDP, for example, it benefits from good quality data regulation and data sharing. So I think I'll just sort of start the debate, but I think I would just say that it's a good thing. But obviously, the regulation itself has to be effective and appropriate. And certainly in Nigeria, the structure is there to do good. And it'll be an interesting journey to see how that sort of plays out over the next few years and decades.
Okay, thank you so much, Trevor. Any other thoughts on the regulations?
I can go in here. I think the regulations that NDPR kind of outlines for data protection, it's a good first step. But the rest of the legal infrastructure, I think, needs to be adjusted to catch up to it. There are a lot of idiosyncrasies that exist in countries like Nigeria and other data-light countries that NDPR, which is based on GDPR, kind of skips over or takes for granted, and that I honestly believe could cause a significant could really cause a significant slowdown in how the data world gets to move forward. But like Trevor said, a well-regulated system where data can be shared effectively to the benefit of the owner of the data, which is the key underlying word there. The data should be shared, and the use of that data should be to the positive benefit of the data owner. It's something that's essential for any economy to optimize itself and grow effectively.
Okay. Thank you, Winston. Thank you, Trevor. Any other contributions?
Okay, yeah. I would just like to talk a bit about the regulatory frameworks that we currently have in place. So I'll start by saying that I believe Nigeria has taken a positive step in the right direction by putting in place the NDPR, which, as Winston earlier mentioned, is mirrored or fashioned, after the GDPR. And, the essence of the NDPR is to firstly protect, to foster, better protection in personal data when involved in transactions that involve personal data, to also prevent the manipulation of personal data and to ensure that Nigerian businesses remain competitive in the international trade. But is the NDPR comprehensive enough? That is a question that is currently in the legal space. So, which would give more reason why currently there's an NDPR Act, there's a bill that is before the legislature to enact an act that would be more comprehensive and that would cover greater areas, of privacy in Nigeria. So, and even before that, we have other we have other legislations, though not act of the National Assembly, but we have other legislations that try to cover in one way or the other, privacy protections, like the Consumer Protection Framework of 2016. We also, that was pursuant to the Central Bank Act, Nigeria Act of 2007. We also have the Cyber Crimes Prohibition Prevention ECC Act. We also have the NIMC Act. So, we also have the Nigerian Data Protection Regulations, which would make pursuant to the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation. So in essence, we also have the Federal Competition and Consumer Act 2019. So in essence, what these regulations all aim to act on is to provide a greater protection for data in Nigeria. But is there room for improvement? Can we still grow on it? Definitely, we can.
Okay, thank you, Modupe.
Yeah, so just to share my thoughts on that as well, as the other panelists have mentioned about the NDPR, that's the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation. It generally regulates and controls people's access to data. And, it's like, they have said, it's kind of mirrors the GDPR. Obviously, there's still, there's need for more improvements on there because it's meant to, set rules on how content is obtained from individuals before accessing their data. The content has to be clear and concise, not content obtained by implication, and also generally being compliant with, regulation to how data is collected in Nigeria, and then ensuring that it's not transferred to an authorized party.
Okay, thank you, Eniola. I think from the panelists' views, we've been able to identify that the NDPR regulation in Nigeria is a step in the right direction, and that yes, there's room for improvement, but also it's like I said, a step in the right direction, and we can't wait to see how it will play out over the coming years. So thank you so much. You guys have done tremendous justice to that. Now I'd like to find out what you also think about why are we here today? Why do we think that data privacy is an important discussion currently, or an important issue for discussion currently?
Yeah, data privacy, to share my thoughts on that, data privacy is always an important subject. There's a common saying that information is power. And in recent times, literally everything is digitized, and you can have every single information about yourself on your device, and it's basically very easy to share information online. So this here is why data privacy is important, because there are a few risks associated with that. Identity theft, for instance, especially identity theft, actually. So if the data on an individual or an entity gets into the wrong hands, things could go really bad. A very good example is in case of banking data or even healthcare data. So if there are no regulations as to how it is shared or collected, a lot of things could go really wrong.
Yeah, thank you, Eniola. Thank you. Any other thoughts on the importance of this discussion that we're having here today?
Well, if you take a look, I'm sorry, Trevor. If you take a look at what has happened in the recent past with social media hyper-targeting of messaging, and it has become obvious that the ability to mine data of individuals and use that for what some might call malicious intentions is actually out there. So the use of data can fundamentally alter the way a system operates by being able to amplify differences while tapping down tapping down similarities, you can cause a significant amount of discourse. And if you look through all the reporting that there's been on this, the suffering of the Rohingya in Myanmar has been linked to a significant amount of messaging going through social channels. We've seen the same thing in India. We'll talk about the US elections, where the claim out there is that different actors came in to significantly politicize the system. And even if you look at the response to just COVID, where something that was done without question during the 1913 flu, which is mask mandate, all of a sudden now becomes a political statement. So data is a great tool for making things, for delivering goods and services more efficiently, but data can also be a vector for which to separate society. So to actively, properly regulate it is something that is very important just to the regular function of a society.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And
Thank you, Winston.
Sorry, Naomi. I think I'd agree with that. And I think that there's a couple of points there. The identity theft thing that Eniola touched on has been a major issue for many years, and probably relatively sort of underplayed until, I say, relatively recently. But I think what we're probably got to do here is try and differentiate between sort of data privacy in terms of personal data, in terms of biometric data and sensitive data versus perhaps behavioural data and so on. And I think that's where a lot of the social media channels, for example, will often sort of look at behavioural information rather than necessarily absolute personal data. So I just think there's almost like two camps here to think about. Data privacy is fundamental to this. I think the frustration is that, and the points that Winston made, the way that some organisations are able to get not necessarily personal data, but certainly significant data, and be able to manipulate it in whatever way is a concern. But I think, and I think the social media world versus the financial world are probably, I mean, although the data is the same, they're sort of two different camps. And I just wonder whether we can debate this on this call or another time. Is that how they are perhaps two slightly different subjects, but both fundamental to individuals' needs and benefits.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Thank you so much.
So I would like to talk about it from the commercial aspect. The reality of this 21st century is that, the personal data that individuals give away freely is now being transformed into a precious commodity. Essentially, data is now being seen as an asset, which will take us to our topic of data or monetization of data. So the implication of that is, the personal data that individuals give away freely is now being taken by companies, organizations, and being monetized. And there's a concept of data appropriation that is in discourse in the tech space that, and this refers to when data is being used, personal data of individuals is being used without consent and without adequate compensation. So these are issues which essentially, as well as what the other panelists have discussed, which drive countries, to put in place regulations to protect personal data, because personal data is now being monetized and is now being used to the benefit of organizations, companies, and without adequate consent given and also without compensation given to these individuals. And because, for instance, a leading software maker, Oracle, reported that the reason for the success of some major tech giants like Google, like Uber, like Amazon, is because of the fact that data is now being conceptualized as an asset. And also, the data broker industry was reported in 2019-2020 to have generated around $200 billion in annual revenue from data. So this alone goes to show that, as well as, despite the fact that data sharing is good, it has its benefits, there also needs to the individuals need to be protected because it is being monetized. And as we're in the jet age, it's aware that as we proceed in time, things are only going to become even more digitalized. Everything is going to be more digitalized, and we need to be protected.
If I might follow
thank
up
you.
on that.
So Okay, Winston, please go ahead.
The issue with data monetization really has been, if you boil down to the bottom of it, it's been a disproportionate share of the benefits that come with that. So if you take a look at it, I use Google, I like Google, I get benefits from Google, I don't pay for Google. People are fine with that. But when people start to see companies like Google and data brokers, throwing up these massive numbers. So the question, it now becomes, that this one side is exploiting the other. So this is just another case of where we're seeing that divide in the haves and the have-nots. So in this case, the question is, how do we make that sharing fairer? We saw, if you look back a couple of months, there was an issue with newspapers in Australia, and the internet has done a lot to basically destroy the world of physical print. But what did the Australians do? The Australians tried to force the search engines to pay them. They went through courts, the engines now went back and signed different deals with the people, and all of a sudden now it's a non-issue. So the question now is, how do we find a way to take all the benefits, the material benefits, because the functional benefits are clear, but how do we find a way to more equally share the material benefits between the person, society, and the company? And I think that's really where the crux of this issue lies.
Okay, thank you, Winston. So what I'm hearing is, sorry, Modupe.
No, I was saying definitely, I believe, I agree as well, that is really the crux of the discussion. How can this be shared, equally? I'm agreeing with his point.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is that, the availability of data and data sharing has its positives and also has its negative sides. And then we've come to the point where we need to find how to make sure that everybody is benefiting, both the companies who are generating the data and the individuals who are providing their personal information or providing data to get services. So I don't know about anybody else, but I'm excited and I'm really learning a lot from our panel members. And so I'm thinking to myself, as a company or as a company or a business entity, what are the considerations that I should have or I should exhibit if I'm trying to monetize data?
Okay, to touch on that, I'll say that what I'll say is that, as a company, operating in Nigeria, we using Nigeria as the premise, the first considerations will definitely, start from the NDPR. Companies need to, consider the principles of the NDPR, the policies contained in NDPR, and how to correctly apply them. Now, these principles, they range from the lawfulness, transparency, and fairness of the collection of this data, the purpose of collection of data, data minimization, the accuracy, the storage limitation, and data security. So, in collection and utilization of personal data for monetization, these principles have to be considered. Foremost of that is the principle of lawfulness, transparency, and fairness. So the regulations state that individuals must freely consent to the use and collection of this data. So companies must ensure that the data they are collecting is well consented to. And if consent can be deviated from, then the data collected must be for a lawful purpose. And that means the purpose for which you're collecting it must be lawful, must have a legitimate legal purpose. For instance, maybe a contractual relationship between the consumer and the company, which will necessitate the use of the personal data. Now, having scaled through the hurdle of lawfulness, you must also go to purpose limitation. You must collect the data for the purpose for which you want to use the data. So using the data for any purpose outside of that, breaches the right of the personal data of the data subject, and of course, which is punishable under the regulations. As well as that, you talking about data minimization. The use of the use for the data must be minimized for the purpose for which it is collected. You mustn't use it beyond that purpose. You must only collect what you actually need. As well as, then the accuracy of the data. What you're collecting must be accurate in pursuant of what you desire to use it for. Then the storage of the data. Of course, the Act talks about storage limitations. The Act doesn't define a specific time frame for which data must be stored, but it must be limited. The storage must be in line with the use of the data. So once the data has been collected and used for the purpose, you discard it. You don't keep it for longer than necessary, because these are instances which breach the data protection of data subjects. Because if it's stored for longer than it is needed, then it can be used, it can be hacked, it can be breached, and then other organizations, individuals, or data hackers can use that, use the personal data of the individual for other means or other users, and also, which talks about issues of monetizing the data unlawfully. Then, of course, the data security, security measures must be put in place to protect the data of this individual. So I think primarily, these few points, these are the issues which must be considered by companies who desire to monetize data, personal data of consumers.
And that's a great point, Modupe. Lots of great points, to be honest. I think just to add to that, I think the big one for me in this sort of consideration, and obviously all the principles there, but I think that what a lot of it boils down to is legitimate interest, which I think you've touched on anyway. And that ultimately, in terms of the data processors and the users of that data, that's where I think the waters get a little bit muddy sometimes, or potentially get a bit more muddy. Because I think even with consent, there's then a question mark as to how that data is going to be used. And so for me, and I know this is covered under the GDPR and the NPDR as well, but legitimate interest for me is so fundamental within the data privacy world. And then, as you've touched on, making sure the data is only used for its purpose and for as long as it's needed. And they're often relatively subjective elements that I think that can be debated on and on. But I would certainly emphasise the legitimate interest point.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with the points Modupe had mentioned earlier. Being compliant with NDPR regulations, and then even going a step further and being compliant with GDPR as well. Understanding data management, understanding how to properly utilize and protect the data that they have access to, and ensuring that it's not breached by unauthorized, entities. So yeah, I feel that these are, very important points to consider in monetizing data.
I could add one more thing to all this. If we take a look at, having gone through the NDPR process and having taken a look at at least a light touch look at the GDPR rules, the one place I think that it falls a little short is there is no solid infrastructure requirements for people that handle data in any way, shape, or form. Whether we like it or not, in a digital environment, the infrastructure, the necessary infrastructure to handle it is significant, and there should be a minimum bar. So if you, for anybody who has ever gone through the process of working in an industry like the banking industry, before you can open a bank branch, there are some minimum infrastructure requirements that must be in place that the central bank feels, the regulator there feels is required for this branch to operate safely and effectively. And I think that's the same way we should treat anybody who handles data. There should be some minimum infrastructure requirements that would give people minimum security, because I don't think anybody would leave their valuables sitting on the top of a car parked in the middle of a car park. If we would not do that, then we also would not want a company who doesn't have enough infrastructure to protect your data from minimally successful or minimally experienced intrusion. So that is the one place where I think that there is a gap. Yes, trying to enforce this would cause a significant amount of inequality or put additional cost on people. But we go back, nobody collects data for the fun of it. People collect data to make money out of it. And if you're going to be willing to use data to deliver better services and make better profits, you should be willing to make the necessary investments to ensure that raw material that's being given freely from your customers is protected.
I'll just go back to you on that, Winston. That's great. That's a good shout, actually. And I think that information security, I suppose, it's not part of this discussion, but I think it's connected to Winston's point. I mean, there's an ISO standard 27001, I think it is, that focuses very heavily on information security and infrastructure and how you should manage the physical side of things as well as perhaps the operational side of things. So I think that's maybe another element that we should probably add into the mix here. I don't know whether it's on the table at the moment. Perhaps Modupe could comment, but certainly some of ISO 27001 would be a good complementary approach to this whole subject, I think. So, I mean, obviously here we're focused very much on use of data, access to data and so on. But to Winston's point, I think there's a broader sort of structural side of things that needs to go hand in glove. That would be certainly my view anyway. Okay.
So, I'll say, I just got a question in the comment section that says, they want to hear your thoughts on, there's a school of thought that says that data privacy and data monetization are on opposite sides of the track, really. You can't be talking on one hand about protecting the privacy of the individual, of the consumer, and on the other hand, saying that we are going to monetize your data, but also use your data to create value or generate revenue. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. I want to hear your thoughts on what you think about data privacy and data monetization. Can they be a fusion, or is it something that is it like all mechanics?
Yeah. I'll start this one off if that's okay. So for me, this whole subject is about education and being informed. I think that as you say, they are sort of diametrically opposed. I think the element of if data is private, how can you monetize it, and vice versa. But I think that I think, as we touched on at the start, the upside, the benefits of doing this well, far outweigh the negatives of the other side of the coin. And I think what from my experience anyway, and I think this is a theme that is appropriate in Nigeria too, is that the more informed consumers are, the more informed authorities are, the more informed regulators are, the better. So I think that although they are, if you say, almost slightly contradictory sort of themes, if you do it right and everyone understands and it is explained, that's mystique and that fear can be dealt with. I think that's the theme I've seen in lots of markets, and I think Nigeria is going the same way too. So financial education, data education, and people being informed. That to me is a key subject.
Yeah. Okay. Just to add to what. Okay. Sorry. Anyway, you were saying.
No, I was just saying. I was just going to ask if there are any other more thoughts or contributions towards that question.
Okay, yeah. So just to add to what Trevor said, I completely agree that there needs to be a more, data education. Because firstly, we need to understand the concept of data monetization, and how this can be carried out. There are different types of data monetization, but just to broadly condense it, I'll just talk about two main types. There's direct data monetization and there's indirect data monetization. So direct data monetization is when, an individual, directly sells out direct access to his data to third parties. And this, when I say direct access, this informs the raw data, for instance, your name, your phone number, and all that. Then indirect data monetization is when individual, is involved or allows his personal data to be part of an analysis to review, insights that can improve an organization or corporations, understand. So what the data controller or the data processor in that instance does with the data is compiles it and uses it as an analysis, to form a report, and this indirect data monetization is what is mainly used by, in the market by marketers to market products. For instance, they can make use of your engine search, your social media pages, who you follow, your trends, and then they aggregate the data and then use it to market products to you. So the point is that, if having proper knowledge on these types of data monetization, the individual can still protect, his or her personal data, to the level and extent of which he or she is willing to share.
If I could add one more thing to this, at the end of the day, if we go back and we look at it, what boils down on the bottom of all this is this lack of control. We feel that when we hear the word data monetization, we feel that we are not part of this process by which somebody else is deriving value from our data. What we need to spend a lot more time doing, and I think all the players should spend a lot more time doing, is really telling people why we're willing to, why we are doing this and what benefits they are getting out of it. And in some cases, giving people back, I don't want to say real control, because in all honesty, I don't think you have all that, but at least giving people the veneer of some control. So to give a perfect example, all of us here, I'm sure, have been on a plane in the last 1 year. To get on the plane, there are a lot of things that you're required to do to get on the plane that are borderline invasive. You walk up to you walk through security, you take off everything that you have, you throw them onto a tray, you walk in, someone x-rays you. You're more than happy to do all that to get on the plane. You're willing to do all that because in your mind, if I do that, I'm safer in that plane because, quote unquote, the bad actors don't get on the plane. That is the trade-off, and you're happy to make that trade-off. And the same thing with data. Every single time that data is monetized, it's actually used in one way or another to bring the product closer to you. So if you went out to get a loan, which is usually the one place where it hits people the most, loan or insurance, if you allow the person making the loan to have your data, you have a data that is priced for you and not priced at you. And the difference in the two is I can price a loan at everybody here saying you're all employed, so I'll give you one rate. But meanwhile, three out of the five of us here might be living rent-free, have zero debt, and have significantly larger amount of borrowing power, which makes you a lower risk. But because I have priced at you and not for you, you end up actually paying a cost for that. So I think there needs to be a lot more time spent to let people understand that data monetization actually works both ways. As you give out your data and things become safer, in the case of where you give out your medical data and you get treatments that are actually built for you, you're getting value. You give out your data and you can go through an airport because now you're a trusted traveler a lot faster without having to undress half the way. You're getting value. And it's so good to understand that monetization doesn't have to be simply money, that it can also be getting access, speeding up your experience and customizing solutions just for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so what I heard from that is, just like Trevor said, what we need to is kind of like educate the public to know that, by monetizing your data, we're never taking advantage of. It's actually for the greater good. We have another question from the participants.
I'll try and respond to this one, and then we can open it up. I think this is a person.
Hello, did you guys hear the question?
I was going to say, if you could repeat the question, please. The line was breaking a bit. I didn't quite hear it clearly. Sorry, Trevor.
No, that's fine. Let's hear the question again. I think I heard most of it, but I do right. It was a bit crackly, so let's do it again.
So I guess what the participant is trying to find out is your thoughts on a centralized location for that data.
Yeah, so I'll see if I can sort of start this off, and this is an opinion rather than necessarily a fact. I think that for me, obviously from a customer experience point of view, which is certainly something I'm very.
I don't know if you guys heard me this time.
Yeah, we heard you fine, Naomi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I heard you.
Sorry,
Can you hear me okay now? Right, let's try again. So what I was going to say there was, I think the customer experience factor or theme is a big one, right? You want things to be as seamless and as easy as possible, and that makes a huge amount of sense. So if it was great that when you go and put your name and address into whether it's a new SIM card or a new credit card, whatever it might be, that you only had to do that sort of once. The risk, though, I suppose, that we have to sort of counter that is that if everything is listed in one place and managed in one area, I just think that introduces an anti-competitive risk. And while from a customer experience point of view, it might be good, I think it introduces other factors that are probably less good. So my view is the principle is fine, the practicalities of it, I'm not sure. And that was something we need to probably debate at length.
Yeah, okay, you can go on.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. And so my opinion on that actually is I agree with what Trevor has said. I feel that there should be one source of data. In terms of data organization, I feel like we have a long way to go in this country because we have, BVN, NIN doing practically the same thing. So if we could have one source of data to organize all our information just in one place, that would be better off, in terms of customer experience, in terms of, client experience. But yeah, there are risks to that as well. If, this gets breached, it means that all information on one person has, gotten into the wrong hands, essentially. So yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, so what I wanted to say is that, this is quite an interesting question because, recently, I think it was about a week or 2 weeks ago, the NCC, issued the business rules for the implementation of the national identity policy for SIM card registration. And it asked the participants, individuals, to give their comments or their reviews of the regulations of the rules. So interestingly, what the commission wants to do is to create a unified central database for all data. So they want to link your NIN, your BVN to your SIM card registration. So existing users will have to register their SIM cards and which is already linked to their NIN and their BVN, while all new users who desire a new SIM card will have to re-register with their NIN, their BVN. And I was thinking to myself, okay, this like what Trevor has mentioned, this will have some risks because, for instance, if the database is breached, this is literally the individual's life that all information to their life that is going to be accessed because your NIN is linked to your international passport, your BVN is linked to your bank account, your SIM card is linked to your location. You understand? So this is going to be a huge data breach. So I said to myself, do we have the infrastructure to guard against a breach if such should occur? Because this will mean, a lot of individuals will be put at risk, a lot of security risks. So that's a question, which is currently, being debated out there.
I mean, just to add to it again, I mean, without wanting to get political about it, it sort of smacks almost of sort of socialist, sort of almost communist type sort of models, which I'm not going to argue on that. I'm just making the point that it comes with some issues, whereas in perhaps a more competitive world where you've still got the same issues to worry about in terms of security and privacy and so on, it's sometimes better to not have all your eggs in one basket. Let's maybe use that as the analogy.
Yeah, I agree.
So somebody else is asking now. This isn't directly related to the topic of discussion, but if we I want to crave your indulgence and get your opinion. And I think Winston will be in a better place to answer this question. Now, the participant wants to know that when a loan factory linked to, maybe for example, a credit bureau, why is it that when the payment of the loan is fully liquidated, the name of the borrower is not expunged from the reports?
Okay. Interestingly enough, you don't want your name expunged from the report if you've completely liquidated it. So let's look at three different people. And person one takes a loan for 6 months. Person two loans 6 months. Person three, same thing. Person one takes the loan for 6 months, pays exactly on the date it's due, and pays it off in 6 months. Great. Now, if that person's information is removed, next time they go to get a loan, the benefit of what they've done is not there. They don't get the benefit of their actions, which is following the rules and paying off their loan as they do. Person B, same thing, gets a loan 6 months, and guess what the person B does? Person B is one of those people that is just nervous about debt. 6 months loan, doubles up, pays it in 3 months. Again, this person has behaved in a manner that's different, in a positive way, but if we remove their name and their behavior, they don't get the enhancement that they should get, because now we know that this person behaves different from this other person. And then person B takes a 6 month loan, pays it off in a year and a half, and it is expunged. When I go to lend money, I don't realize that this person's idea of repayment date is based on whenever they feel like doing it. So at the end of the day, it is important for your past behavior to be available for somebody who's going to offer you something relatively close to that same service. So that way they can give you a solution that is made for you and is not a solution that is thrown at you. And so that's really the main reason why you want that information to be there. Even if you want the other side, you would like to know if this person will pay me on time or not, so you can price it as such that you are adequately compensated for any extension that might happen on that loan.
Yeah, I mean, I can perhaps comment on that as well, Winston. I think your points are all very valid. I think that in the world of analytics, in particular, where it's not necessarily personalised, but certainly that historical data is important. So there's a not a phrase, but a well-known view that basically the past predicts the future when it comes to data and analytics, and so exactly to that, the behavioural information that comes from understanding how, for example, Trevor Ryan behaves versus Winston is important from a decision-making point of view. So if that data is taken away or it's expunged or whatever, or anonymized even for that matter, to a certain extent, you lose the value that comes from that data. And, the fact that somebody's paid completed the loan or whatever is a positive thing. And that again, from an analytical point of view and from a risk management point of view, is important information. So, I would agree with exactly what Winston said.
Okay, thank you so much. Now that question was from one of the participants. I hope you've been able to understand the reason why it is advisable for your records to still remain remain there as opposed to being expunged even after you have fully liquidated your loan. And okay, so I'm thinking to myself, are there any other what are the various aspects to consider, regarding data privacy? If we could just share our thoughts on that, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, the various aspects to consider, I think most important one is consent, because it is very important. Without me as an individual giving you access to my information, you shouldn't have access to it. So to lawfully gain access to people's data or entities' data, consent must be obtained in a clear form. You're not, coercing the user through fraudulent means, because these days this is very common practice. You want to access someone's information and then you are being sly about it. So, a lot of companies have to be transparent as to how they collect and use people's data. I think another one would be transparency. So just in terms of understanding that individuals can actually take back ownership of their data. So if, let's say, I'm sharing my data with a company and I choose not to share that information again, I should be able to, revoke that access. And then the other point would be compliance, just in terms of being compliant with regulations surrounding data privacy, being compliant with NDPR, as we had mentioned, and then even going a step further and being compliant with GDPR.
Just adding to what Eniola said, starting with the consent point, I completely agree. And I feel like this consent, the issue of consent, it has to be revisited. And this is, talking of within the Nigerian space, I don't know globally how it's being implemented, but within Nigeria, because my observation is that, despite the fact, when the NDPR was first implemented, it took a while for companies, but then I noticed towards the tail end of the year, a number of organizations, started putting up cookies, on their websites, informing people we collect data and also drafting their privacy policies. But, I looked, for a layman, for an average person, do they really understand what they are reading? Do they understand these cookies, what these cookies are saying? Do they understand this privacy policy? I feel it's not clear enough. It's not clear enough to reach even the average person that, this is what it is. This is what your data is. This is what your data is being used for. This is how your data is being, collected and stored. It needs to be so clear that even a child would understand that, yes, by using this website, I am given rights to my data. My data is going to be used for this, that, So I completely agree on the issue of consent as well as transparency. Companies and organizations need to be clearer and more transparent about how this data is going to be used and how it is being collected. Because I also observed that even in the issue of collection, at some point when you visit a site or visit a page or whatever, they tell you, okay, your data is being collected, but if you're redirected to another page, you're not so sure if that your data is being collected, and probably it is, but you're unaware that your data is still being collected and the site history or your browsing history is being collected. And and also, okay, another area that I'd like to touch on is the area of awareness. There needs to be more awareness because personal data collection and use, as well as consent, touches literally every aspect, every sphere of our society. For instance, if you go to church, there are instances where, recent times in this the COVID, the incidents of the COVID, a number of churches were mandated to put down a register. So individuals put their names, their telephone numbers, their addresses before they can be granted access to church. Probably, and which they said was in line with new COVID-19 regulations, which were issued to all churches. But there was nowhere on the form, using my experience as an example, there was no on the form where I was given the opportunity to consent to the use of my data. I don't know what my data is what this personal information that I put out is going to be used for. You understand? So even so, it's clear that there needs to be more awareness. And churches, organizations, restaurants, every person, it needs to be so clear that yes, your personal data is collection, use, storage of personal data is so important, and your personal data is going to be collected at every point in time. But I believe that we will get there because the way legislations across the globe are, championing data privacy protection, I believe we're going to get there, but it's just going to take some time.
If I might just add one thing, I think the one thing that regulation can do very simply and very quickly to start to move us in the right direction is in the area of disclosure. And we're not talking about disclosure and pardon the word, in the legalese sometimes that is put on websites. I think what needs to happen is the regulator has to, for lack of a better word, come up with plain, simple language that everybody has to use if they're doing XYZ with your data. And this is not something new. I believe this was in the 80s in the US, I think it was the Truth in Lending Act. And what it forced every lender to do was to state clearly what your true costs were for the particular loan you were taking, so that people can easily compare one loan to the other, and without being an expert or without having a lawyer beside them. So the key thing is, can we get language that anybody can understand, that everybody uses, so that if you go from one site to another, if I'm collecting your data for marketing purposes, the way it's written on the site at Migo Money is the same way it's written on CoreTech, is the same way it's written on VanguardNigeria.com. I think that is one thing that the regulator can do very quickly, that can start to get people to begin to understand exactly what they're giving up and hopefully what they're getting out of that process. And that would move us to, that will move this whole conversation to a place where it's based less on fear and supposition, but rather on real need and getting that balance between benefits and what they're giving up.
Okay, thank you so much, Winston. Thank you. We still have another question here, and I'm basically trying to understand what the participant is asking, but I can't seem to interpret what he's trying to say. So what we're going to do for you, Peter, if you can hear me, is that we will just drop your email address and we can send you a response. I want to thank everybody so much for taking part in this conversation today, lending our voices to this conversation. We know that it's an ongoing discussion. It's going to be around for a very long time. And I'm just very thankful to be, involved in this today, to be able to learn from everybody's opinion, and hopefully we will get where we are we'll get where we're trying to get to with the regulations and everything else. So before we round up the event, I'd like to give our participants a minute to talk about their company and the services that they provide.
Okay. So shall I go first? So CreditRegistry, hopefully everyone's familiar with CreditRegistry, Nigeria's largest and most innovative credit bureau. I mean, our reason for being essentially is to bring benefit to consumers and the economy, and we do that through the management of data and the delivery of services to make sure that individuals and businesses make the best decisions when it comes to lending and anything associated with that sort of general sort of area. And we pride ourselves on innovation and certainly a huge emphasis on data quality and data security, which is why this is such a topical subject. So thank you for the opportunity for taking part. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
All right, I guess I'll go next. Migo Money we're a technology company, and our reason for existence is to help the financial system gain access to more and more customers who are currently not visible to them or not economical for them to serve. So we are not a lender. What we do is we go out there and find individuals that the current financial services system is not serving appropriately or has not been able to serve. And we bridge that gap and bring those people closer to the financial services companies or the banks, microfinance banks, or who have you, so that they can provide their goods and services to those people, which at the end of the day, optimizes the value chain for delivery of credit and financial services, but more importantly, starts to deliver real, actionable, valuable financial inclusion to people who have been underserved in the market for a very long time.
All right, so I'll go next. So what Okra, I work with Okra, and what we do is to give full access to users to real-time financial information by allowing them to connect their accounts to third-party applications. So it means that businesses or entities can have access to real-time information on their users' accounts, whether it be verifying their identities or pulling their statements or having access to what the trend of their income is, and then also direct payments. So that's it. Thank you.
I work for COURE, our host of today's event, and COURE is a platform services provider. And since its formation, COURE has been focused on the accurate, secure, and timely provision of relevant data and the proper implementation of technology to improve its clients' businesses, processes, as well as its operations. So COURE has two platforms, main platforms which operate, which are the ANQ and the Hub platform. And these platforms provide the centralized data access, management, and delivery in a standardized manner. And this platform also enables COURE to aggregate various forms and types of data, analyze the data, and create services that provide value to customers. Yeah.